Hello, everyone. It was good seeing you the other day. What I'm going to be talking to you today about are some of the key battles regarding World War I, in particular what took place on the Western Front, as well as the Eastern Front of the war, and the last thing on how World War I was really a global war. So if we start looking at the battles that took place on the Western Front of Europe here, I'm going to show you a couple of the key battles. What we're going to be looking at here is the Battle of the Marne, the Battle of Verdun, the Battle of the Somme, the Battle of Saint-Saint-Mihiel, and the Hindenburg Line. Right? Four key battles that took place on the German Western Front in France. Now, a little bit about the Battle of the Marne. It took place between the 5th of September through the 9th, 1914. It was geographically the Marne River, which is east of Paris. It was the most important battle because it stopped Germany's rapid advance. And if you remember the Schlieffen Plan, we talked about how Germany moved its forces west through Belgium, parts of Luxembourg, sweeping down into France. So at the Battle of the Marne, the most important consequence was that the French and British forces were able to prevent the German plan of a swift and decisive victory in preventing the fall of Paris as well. But what it's also going to do is it's going to set the stage for trench warfare, 4 years of trench warfare, this type of warfare on the Western Front. You notice there's an image here to the right, the Second Battle of the Marne, which will take place in the summer of 1918. And what is important to think about this battle is that it combined French, British, and U.S. forces held off a German offensive. The United States of America, by 1918, was involved in World War I. And the battle really marked the last genuine or real attempt by the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary in particular, to win the war. Now, in addition to the Battle of the Marne, we have the Battle of Verdun. And you'll see here that it took place between February 21st through December 18th, 1916. Verdun is located about 120 miles east of Paris in France. Demoralized both sides. There were heavy casualties on both sides, the Allies and the Central Powers. But what you also had with this battle is you had the first extensive use of the flamethrower, very deadly weapon that was used during World War I, that was used to clear out some of the trenches as well as concrete boxes that soldiers would be in to fire their weapons. But it was also a hazard for someone who was a flamethrower because they had to carry all this gallons of fuel, and if they were hit, they would become literally a ball of fire. What's also important about the Battle of Verdun is that half of the German army in France fought at it. In addition, 3/4 of the French army fought at Verdun as well. So it involved a significant amount of forces with this battle, the Battle of Verdun in 1916. What we also have is the Battle of the Somme. And it was fought between July 1st through November 18th, 1916. I want to point out to you, though, here is that the first day of the battle, the British experienced a tremendous amount of loss of life, heavy casualties, and you can see by the image here of the British troops on the front line. It was an absolute disaster for the British the first day of this battle on July 1st, 1916 through various accounts from it. The battle took place in France on the Somme River. The objective was to draw German forces away from Verdun. Tactics become more sophisticated and the supply lines became more efficient, which is important when fighting a war. What we will also see here is the first use of tanks by the British. They weren't the best in terms of being used in battle, but eventually as the war goes on, and in particular in World War II, the use of tanks, they'll address the problems with them and they'll become more efficient in the battlefield. And I also want to point out to you at the Battle of the Somme, overall, approximately, you had almost 1.2 million casualties, 420,000 British, 200,000 French, and about 500,000 Germans. So there was, again, a significant loss of life at the Battle of the Somme in 1916. And in addition, what we have here is the Battle of Saint-Samuel, which took place between September 12th through the 13th, 1918, a two-day battle fought on the French/German border southwest of Verdun. Again, here we see the presence of U.S. forces, the first battle using exclusively American troops under American commanders. The commander of American forces in France during World War I would be a man known in history as General John J. Pershing. Right, he'll be in charge of the American Expeditionary Force. But again, you could see here the issues in fighting these different battles during World War I with this picture. The idea of wagons stuck in the mud, horses being pulled. I mean, it was a very arduous experience trying to move forces in a battlefield or to a battlefield or from it. And the last thing that I want to talk to you about is something known as the Hindenburg Line. And the Hindenburg Line, when we think about it, it proved to be a formidable barrier to prevent Allied advances on the Western Front. The Hindenburg Line was a vast system of defenses in northern France constructed by the Germans in the winter of 1916 through 1917. And it ran quite a length of distance. It consisted of deep and wide trenches, thick belts of barbed wire, concrete machine gun positions, concrete bunkers, tunnels, and command posts. And the Germans really considered it virtually impregnable, that it could not be breached. And again, it provided a stronghold, a formidable barrier to Allied advances. It was the idea of two people that are pictured here in this slide. The first person is General Paul von Hindenburg, hence the name the Hindenburg Line, as well as another man, Erich Ludendorff. So these were the two people who were responsible for the Hindenburg Line. Now, there is also the idea of Operation Albrecht, which was a shrewd maneuver by the Germans to actually retreat to the Hindenburg Line. But what's going to eventually happen is this. Even though the Germans have retreated to this Hindenburg Line, and they're going to use it to conduct submarine attacks against the British supply line, British forces, and it says it right here, are going to eventually breach this line. They're going to break through in early October of 1918. And what's going to happen, and it's significant to understand here, is that about a month later, World War I will come to an end. So what we have here is 4 key battles involving the Western Front during World War I, the Battle of the Marne, the second one in 1918 involving American forces, the Battle of Verdun, the Battle of Somme, the Battle of Saint-Samuel, and the last one, the Hindenburg Line. Now what we're going to look at is how World War I was a global conflict as well as the other fronts of the war. And you'll see here, as I bring it into view, is that in Eastern Europe, in August of 1914, Russian armies had pushed into Eastern Germany. And remember with the Schlieffen Plan, this is not what they wanted. You had the Battle of Tannenberg, where Russia suffered one of the worst defeats of the war. And it's going to cause them to retreat. And it's going to cause a lot of backlash in Russia with the Tsar, Nicholas II at the time. Why did Russia lose the Battle of Tannenberg? They were the least industrialized of the Allies, and therefore they were not prepared to fight. They probably should not even been involved in fighting in World War I. They were running out of supplies. There's stories about Russian soldiers being sent to fight with broomsticks in their hands, absolutely not ready to fight this battle and maybe the war itself. Now, well, we have also the different fronts, Southern Europe and Italy. In 1915, the Italians conclude a secret treaty with the Allies to gain Austrian-ruled lands that were inhabited by Italians in the north. And what's going to happen is Italy's going to switch sides. They're going to go from the Central Powers to the Allies, and they're going to declare war on Austria and Hungary and Germany in 1915. But what's going to eventually happen in October of 1917 is that the Austrians and Germans are going to launch a major offensive against Italian position at Caporetto, which is going to be a disaster for Italy, in a sense, knocking them out of World War I. Now, the war outside of Europe, if we think about the Ottoman Empire, they will be on the side of the Central Powers. They will be involved in closing off Allied ships from the Dardanelles, which was a waterway that connected the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. And what's going to happen is that the Allies are going to try to open up this waterway in a battle known as the Battle of Gallipoli in 1915. It was a massive Allied effort, but it also involved the British bringing in their forces from some of their Commonwealths, two of them, Australia and New Zealand. You also had Indian troops who were fighting there as well because, again, India was part of the British Empire to try to open the strait. A disaster for the Allies, and they probably knew that probably after a day or so fighting this Battle of Gallipoli, and eventually it leads to their retreat in January of 1916. Now, we also have the last thing here is the war in the colonies. The Allies will overrun or scatter German colonies in Africa and Asia. But the one thing I want to point out to you here is that the Allies during World War I will turn to their colonies, their commonwealths, and their dominions for troops, laborers. And what I think is important to understand here is that these people had mixed feelings about serving. Why? Because in essence, they were controlled by the British, for example. Their rights were not upheld. Now you're asking them to go and help you and win a world war. And a number of troops from Australia, New Zealand, India, and other parts of the British Empire will go and fight for the Allies, the British, during World War I. But when the Indian troops return home after the war is over, their rights will not be recognized any further. They'll still be looked at as less regarding the Europeans. So that's why they had mixed feelings. It's not until after World War II, for example, that India actually receives its independence. So you have some information here regarding the battles that took place during World War I. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to reach out to me. I also sent you a homework assignment the other day regarding science and technology during World War I. Bye-bye.